She loses one match, and suddenly the noise gets louder than the applause. That's the reality Alexandra Eala is living right now. And if you think this is just another young prospect dealing with a tough loss, think again. Because what's happening around her isn't just about tennis. It's about pressure. It's about expectation. And according to Kim Clijsters, it's about being treated like Michael Jordan in her own country. And that comparison, that changes everything. At just 20 years old, Alexandra Eala has somehow become both the future of Philippine tennis and the lightning rod for every opinion imaginable. When she wins, she's rewriting history. When she loses, some fans act like she's betrayed a nation. That's not normal pressure. That's superstar pressure. And after her first-round exit at the Australian Open, things escalated fast. Let's talk about that match for a second. Eala lost to Alycia Parks in a tight 3-set battle. It wasn't a blowout. It wasn't a collapse. It was competitive. It was gritty. It was the kind of match that could swing either way. But the reaction? You would have thought she'd fallen out of the top 500. That's when the criticism started rolling in. Online comments, frustration, doubt, some fans questioning whether she's living up to the hype. And this is where the story really begins. Because instead of shrinking, instead of disappearing, Eala kept moving forward. And that's exactly what caught the attention of Kim Clijsters. Now, when someone like Clijsters talks, you listen. This is a 4-time Grand Slam champion, a former world #1, someone who understands the grind, the spotlight, and the emotional toll of elite tennis. On her Love All podcast, she didn't just casually mention Eala. She dissected her game, she analyzed her mindset, and then she dropped a comparison that stunned a lot of people. But before we get to that Jordan comparison, let's break down what Clijsters actually sees in Eala. First, the tennis. Clijsters pointed out something simple but powerful. Eala makes opponents uncomfortable. That's not a small compliment. In today's WTA, where margins are razor thin, discomfort is a weapon. She highlighted Eala's left-handed advantage, and that matters. Lefties naturally change angles. They force different patterns. They make right-handed players adjust in ways they're not always comfortable with. That alone adds a layer of unpredictability. But Clijsters didn't stop there. She said Eala's forehand is strong, but her backhand, even better. More aggressive, more decisive. That's interesting because most young players lean heavily on their forehand. For Eala to have a backhand that can dictate, that's a foundation you build championships on. Then there's the spin, the heaviness, the ability to push opponents behind the baseline and then suddenly create sharp angles to open the court. That's tactical maturity. That's not just talent. That's understanding geometry under pressure. And let's not ignore the physical side. Clijsters praised her footwork, her stamina, her movement. In modern tennis, you cannot survive without elite conditioning, and Eala has that base. So, technically, the tools are there. But tennis isn't just about tools, it's about timing, it's about consistency, and it's about surviving the emotional roller coaster that comes with expectations. This is where things get deeper. Clijsters didn't just talk about Eala's strokes. She talked about her mind. Because after that Australian Open loss, something else happened. Rafael Nadal publicly showed support for Eala. And that wasn't random. Remember, Eala trained for years at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. She moved there when she was just 13 years old. Imagine that. 13. Leaving home, leaving comfort, immersing yourself in a high-performance environment in another country. That environment demands discipline, respect, work ethic, mental toughness. And according to Clijsters, that's no coincidence. The results Eala is getting, they're connected to that culture, to that mindset. But even with that foundation, the outside noise is different. Clijsters acknowledged something very real. Eala isn't just dealing with opponents studying her game, she's dealing with an entire nation watching every swing, and that's where the Michael Jordan comparison came in. Clijsters said Eala is like Michael Jordan in the Philippines. Let that sink in. Michael Jordan wasn't just a basketball player. He was a cultural icon, a symbol, a standard. Now imagine being 20 years old and carrying that kind of symbolic weight for your country's tennis future. That's not hype. That's pressure with gravity. And here's the part people underestimate. When you're that visible, every weakness gets magnified. Every loss becomes a headline. Every dip in form turns into a debate. Clijsters made it clear. Players now know Eala. They've studied her strengths. They've identified areas to target. That's the second phase of becoming a star. The tour adjusts to you. This is where careers either plateau or elevate. Consistency, Clijsters said, will be key. Making strength stronger, tightening weaknesses, that's the work ahead. And here's where I want to pause and be honest, because this is where the story gets uncomfortable. Some of the criticism Eala faced after the Australian Open didn't come from rivals. It came from her own supporters. That's the paradox of rapid fame. The same passion that lifts you can turn into pressure when expectations aren't met. But let's zoom out. She's 20. She's climbing the rankings steadily. She just reached another career high ranking recently, and she's doing it while adjusting to the full glare of global attention. That's not failure. That's progression under fire. Now, here's the curiosity gap nobody's really talking about. What happens if she figures out the consistency piece this year? Because if the technical base is there, if the mental environment from Spain is ingrained, if legends like Clijsters are publicly backing her, what does her ceiling actually look like? That's the real question. We've seen flashes, big wins, historic milestones for Philippine tennis. Each personal best isn't just a stat. It's national history. That adds emotional weight to every match she plays. And I think this is where people need perspective. Not every rising star wins a title every month. Development isn't linear. Even the greats had growing pains. The difference is, most of them didn't carry the expectations of an entire tennis-hungry nation while doing it. Clijsters also emphasized protection, not physical protection, emotional protection, shielding a young player from the craziness, as she put it, because social media doesn't sleep. Headlines don't rest. Opinions don't pause. And when you're young, that can seep in. But here's what impresses me most about Eala right now. She didn't disappear after that loss. She didn't spiral publicly. She kept working, kept competing, kept climbing. That's resilience. And resilience is what separates hype from longevity. The Jordan comparison isn't about trophies yet. It's about cultural impact. It's about presence. It's about how much attention follows your name. But if she learns how to carry that attention instead of fighting it, that's when things get dangerous for the rest of the tour. Because a technically sound left-hander with elite conditioning and growing mental armor, that's not a marketing story. That's a competitive threat. Let's also address the reality. She does have weaknesses. Every 20-year-old does. There are moments where shot selection can sharpen. Moments where closing out tight sets needs polish. But those are refinements, not rebuilds. And the fact that Clijsters openly discussed both strengths and areas for improvement tells me something important. This isn't blind praise. This is informed belief that hits differently. And I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is timing. Eala's career is entering a new chapter. The promising junior narrative is over. The tour knows her. The spotlight is hotter. The expectations are louder. This is the proving ground phase. The next 12 to 18 months will define whether she transitions from rising star to consistent contender. And if she does, that Michael Jordan comparison will stop sounding dramatic and start sounding prophetic. But let me flip this to you. Is the pressure helping her grow faster, or is it unfairly accelerating the scrutiny? Because here's the truth. We as fans love building heroes, but we're not always patient watching them develop. So, I want to know what you think. Is Alexandra Eala being pushed too hard by expectations right now, or is this exactly the kind of pressure that creates champions? Drop your thoughts below. I'm genuinely curious how you see this. Because one thing is clear, the world is watching, legends are speaking, and Alexandra Eala isn't going anywhere. She's just getting started. And if the resilience we've seen after that Australian Open loss is any indication, the next chapter might be the one that silences the doubters for good. RedDust Report will be right here when it happens.